What's going on, guys, and we're back. We're back with our main build, the one we play on Nisa. We've been getting a lot of requests about this one, and it's the Spear, Sword, and Shield, so let's go through it. So this is a build you can play in Flex, you can play in Dex, you can play as a melee DPS. It's great for OPRs, arenas, duels, and wars in general. If you enjoy playing the Spear, or if you enjoy playing the Sword and Shield and pairing up the Spear, this is the build for you. It's a build that's very sticky, it's got great tracking, great burst damage, and you can make individualistic plays. The mobility mostly comes from the abilities itself. Obviously you got the Skewer, you got the tracking lunge from the Spear itself. If they do end up getting away, Leaping Strike, Shield Rush, you got a lot of CC combos such as the Shield Bash, into the Sweep, and so on. So we're going to talk a little bit about the skill tree. And the skill tree, there's a couple of perks I want to bring up, and there's some alternatives as well that you could go for. Now, of course, I'm not going for Deep Wound in War scenario because they can cleanse the Skewer. So a lot of the times you're using the Skewers to just get that gap close, the empowerment, and getting a quick succession of burst damage going alongside. But there's a lot of perks you cannot skip, Nearing Precision being one of them, Finishing Blows as well, Aggressive Maneuvers being one of the best perks that the Spear has, as long as you can control it correctly. And there's many other perks that I didn't go for here. For example, Crippling Jabs is just not reliable enough. The slow is great, but you have to hit them on the last attack of your chain, and on top of that they have to be below 30% health. So obviously, consistency's sake, it's just not worth it. Exacerbating Crits is a really nice one, but the same reason I didn't go for it is the same reason why I didn't go for Deep Wound. Obviously, they can cleanse it. In arenas, a little bit different, OPR is a little bit different, but we're just talking about specifically for War build, my primary build. After that, on the zoner side of things, there's one perk I really wanted to go for. It's the Strong Conditioning, and the problem about this perk is you just don't have the points to go for it. You can't really skip anything on the right side, because if you do, you end up not getting Exploited Weakness. But at the same time, at least you get Invigorating Crits, which is amazing. You need to go Coup de Grace because you can do the monkey combos, and you have to go Merciless Strength. One perk I'd love to get rid of is the Deadly Reach, but of course the Deadly Reach is a perk you have to get continued skill tree. One of the big problems that a lot of Dex players ran into is due to the fact that they lost the ability to be as mobile as they once were through the shift. Medium dodge obviously is a little bit different, but most people are playing heavy. There's just no real value going medium. A lot of it just comes down to the fact that you just don't have a reduction of stamina. You also lost the ability to reduce stamina cost by utilizing the 150 dex, which eventually became a 300 dex perk and then eventually got completely removed out of the game. So going heavy is only natural because the distance that you dodge from medium to heavy is equal. The amount of stamina you are using from each dodge is equal as well. What would be the reason of going medium? The 10% damage? Not really, because you get damage reduction as well. You get an extra piece of resilience going heavy. You get an extra piece of freedom as well. And on top of that, you are going to be insanely tank, especially once you start applying these fortifications. So as you can see, with the Sword and Shield Master, I didn't end up going for the leadership. And the main reason I didn't go for the leadership is because of my uptime. My uptime is mostly on the Spear. Therefore, my group members will not really get that much leadership uptime. So it's kind of irrelevant. If you do end up going leadership, you are also sacrificing a lot of really good perks on the right skill tree that works really nicely with Shirking Heals, with the Ankh, or just in general with the heavy fortifying set. And therefore I went for the more value approach. Okay, so let's talk about the attributes. I've gone for the most output damage you can possibly go for the Spear primary, and that's going to be 150 con, 265 dex, you get 15 extra points, but because of Magnify, you have to be very careful about Magnify actually, because I think you can only have about 2 or 3 of them for this build, and you have to have high 700 gear score as well. But anyways, you want to go 200 strength, 265 dex. The reason being the case, of course, getting the 10% damage on stun, slowed, or rooted enemies. This will apply for any stun, slow, roots from your teammates or from your abilities. And then on top of that, the 250 deck, which will mean if you dodge an attack, you're going to proc Shirking Fort, Shirking Heals, Shirking Empower, which is pretty much this, as well as the one from the amulet, and you get so much more bonus damage for 3 seconds, of course, in this regards. And the 200 dex as well is extremely strong as well, and that's going to be pretty much giving you a free rogue. This will work on both weapons as well. Now, why am I not going for 200 con? Well, first of all, I'm not really getting that much aggro, and if I do go for 200 con, I am going to be escalating my armor types, but you don't really need that when you're playing the Void Plate artifact. You just have so much armor rating to begin with, You have already too much protection as well as from the fortifies, so you just don't really take a ton of damage with this build, and the damage you take, you're going to be able to self-heal anyways from the shuriken heals. Let's talk about the gear now. So, of course, there's going to be some variations as well, and there's not necessarily a pure 3 out of 3 burst, because depending on the circumstances, different third perks will be more beneficial. This will depend on what you're facing in wars, or what you're facing in OPRs or arenas, so different game modes will have different opponents, and therefore maybe your different types of gems, your different types of resistances in general, interchanged, even the perks itself. But we're going to be talking about the traditional perks that will have more value in general. Kind of looking to go for the locked perks being Shuriken Fortification and Shuriken Heals. So if you only have the option to go for 2 perks, that's the 2 perks, Shuriken Fort, Shuriken Heals, and the reason why is you want self-sustainability, you want the ability to escalate your armor ratings because you are playing heavy, and on top of that, with the Void Plate, that's also going to be increasing the overall fortification that you are amplifying as well. So we're going to go with the Void Dark Plate. I think this is by far the best heavy artifact for a heavy dex, and a lot of it just comes down to the overall armor rating you're going to be escalating it with. The 2 perks as well on top of that, Enchanted Wood and Physical Aversion, that's already currently locked when you do get the Void Dark Plate. It's just amazing. Against bows, against muskets, even against fire stuff, the Enchanted Wood will be applying some resistances against lights and heavy attacks. And you can lock any 3rd perk you want. Now here I've locked Shuriken Heals because I'm going to go for a full Shuriken Heals set, or for a majority of it. You could also just go for a weapon perk here, for example the Fortifying Perforate, and this is one of the only weapon perks you're going to need. I think it's just going to be this one and the Leaping Strike. The Leaping Strike even is less needed than Fortifying Perforate because the whole point is that you're going to have a lot of spear uptime. So Fortifying Perforate of course is going to get a lot of value, especially on a heavy set. Even if you get 2 attacks off, you're going to get 20% increase armor rating on top of the Void Plate. So you can see kind of where this is going. 3rd perks are generally going to be weapon perks, so obviously Fortifying Perforate as I mentioned, Leaping Strike as well, and then after those 2 perks you're looking at health, any type of conditioning, even Freedom's okay, but it's not really needed, especially not in these dex fights or dex flex fights because there's just not much CC roots. There is a lot of knockdowns and staggers, for example against flails and other spears, but the problem is Freedom doesn't really do anything against that, so it's kind of redundant of going into the Freedom approach. However, if you do want to have 1 Freedom, it's okay because you get 2 pieces for free on the heavy loadout, so you get the 3 in total, which is pretty nice to have. As for the jewelry, we're going to start with the artifact, and no surprise, it's going to be the Ankh. Well, of course, because I'm running Shuriken Heals, I'm going to get healed up by my healer, even if it's just a clap. So I'm going to get a lot of value from the Divine, I'm going to get a lot of value from Center of Attention, even if my consumables is weaker, it doesn't really matter, right? Because you're just going to pump so much value from those other healing applications. Now, I've gone for Shuriken Empower as a 3rd perk. I don't really recommend this, and the only reason I went for Shuriken Empower here is because there's just too many different types of damage, and I'm kind of getting ignored in the fights anyway. So because I'm getting ignored, I can get more value, and therefore going Shuriken Empower makes the most sense, because it's the perk that gives you the most damage out of any. I don't think there's actually any other perk that does give you damage on the amulet itself. Therefore, Shuriken Empower was the obvious choice for me. The other choices that I was contemplating is obviously protection types. Thrust protection, flame protection is always very good, but you could also go for stamina recovery. If you feel like there's just too many different types of damage hurting you, then there's no real point going for a protection type. You might as well just go for stamina recovery in that regard. Next up, we're going to talk about the ring. Now, the ring, again, I would like to go for thrust damage, invigorated punishment, and hardy. But right now, I just went for the cheap budget approaches. This can be actually crafted with materia. You can also just go and get it from, I believe it's Genesis. There's a couple of other rings that are very similar. Leeching is not a bad perk at all. I don't think it might not be working with the Yank anymore, or maybe it still is and they're going to nerf it. It's one or the other, I can't remember what it was. But nonetheless, still a great ring if you're going for a budget approach. You just really want to lock thrust and hardy. Like, these are the 2 main ones. But if you have a 3rd perk, leeching, enfeebling's really good. Best case scenario, invigorated punishment, of course, and mortal empowerment. I think mortal empowerment, you're probably not going to get that much value. Maybe in OPRs you will, in wars maybe not as much, as well as arenas. But invigorated punishment, you're always going to get a little bit more bonus damage. And then we have the earring. Now, regenerating is a perk I really like. It's always very consistent, but there's also nimble nowadays. You could consider going nimble instead of regenerating. Refreshing is great. There's a lot of these heart rune perks you could get. For example, the purifying heart rune, the healing heart rune. But I actually just prefer refreshing. I just think having more uptime in general for your spells gives you way more value anyways. But fortifying toast, I think it's really good. So I've been using this now and I've been looking at my VODs as well. And whenever I'm in trouble, I pop a pot. 20% fortify is a lot. It's a big deal. And then it includes your shuriken fortification applications, your void plane applications as well. Potentially any other fortify as well, either be from the fortifying perforator or the fortifying shield rush. So definitely worthwhile. Alright, so let's talk about the weapons now. This is going to be a spear primary, not a sword and shield spear. Now, a lot of people confuse, well, why aren't I using the Scorpion's artifact? And a lot of it just comes down to, it just doesn't provide damage. The Scorpion Sting artifact is really good for setups. It's really good to, like, kind of start up the combo and then switch into a different type of weapon that will be your primary, and that's why I think the sword and shield spear with the Scorpion Sting is really strong, and you also have to change your attributes. But for this particular video, we're going to be talking the build I main on Nisa, which is the spear, sword and shield. So of course the spear primary for the damage, of course the sword and shield also does damage, but nowhere near the same amount of numbers as the spear primary. And we're gonna go for attunements, penetrating backstab, and kingly jag. Attunement is a no-brainer. It works on abilities, it works on left clicks, it's just too good. It's a little bit of a nerf with the 0.5 extra downtime, but still, it's just too good to pass out. Second perk there, we got the penetrating backstabs. I've done this test on the PTR, I've done the test as well after the PTR when it went official. And honestly, it's an amazing perk. A lot of people going medium heavies as well. Healers getting the featherweight artifact, so increased armor rating. And in general, penetrating backstab, you know, getting the most out of that value when people have high armor rating. And you just cannot miss out on this perk. Now, this third perk here, we got Keenly Jag, and a lot of people would say, well, why not go for Rogue? If you want to go for Rogue, you can go for Rogue, by the way. There is a spear that has attunement and Rogue. It's free. I believe it's called the Keratin Spear. So you can also just go and farm that spear. You can go for attunement, Rogue, and then lock in penetrating backstab, and that's a great spear. The problem is when people start man-fighting you, penetrating backstab and Rogue just is a 0 perk. Whereas Keenly Jagged is always going to be a useful perk. And I really like Keenly Jagged because of exposed wounds. So as soon as you apply bleed on them, you're going to get 15% crit chance. And when you have 15% crit chance, you're going to have a higher uptime on invigorated crits. It's a perk on the skill tree that whenever you crit them, you get stam. There is a little bit of an internal cooldown, but definitely worthwhile. And that's why I've gone for these 3 perks. I just think they're insanely consistent, very good at chasing people, very good at man-fighting people as well. There's just no real downside going for these 3 perks. I think just an excellent combination of perks going together. Next up, we got the sword. Now this is not my go-to sword. As many of you guys already heard about it on my stream, generally, the way I utilize the sword is essentially I start up with the spear, I force them to use their escape mechanics, maybe they flesh out, and then I switch into the sword, leaping strike, always going to get a guaranteed crits, and then after that I can do, you know, a couple left clicks into shield rush, into shield bash, go back to the spear, because I've already created that gap closing distance, and yeah, then I just shred them with the spear once again, the spear being the primary damage. So, the perks you would really want for a build like that, like the perks I want as bis perks, would be attunements, penetrating backstab, and rogue. It's the complete opposite of what I've just mentioned regarding the spear. I don't want to use the sword and shield to fight them head on, unless I'm using fortifying shield rush just to kind of survive and peel for myself the resistances. But otherwise, I'm just going to be utilizing it to chase people. And when I'm chasing people, I'm always guaranteed hit from the back. And therefore going penetrating backstabs and rogue with the attunement, the best 3 perks for the sword. As for the shield, I'm still in the work in progress here. There is a Starstone Mutation 3 shield, round shield, that has fortifying shield rush, enchanted, and keenly jagged. Obviously, all of the round shields come with shield aggression. But that's kind of what I'm going for. So I don't have keenly jagged on the sword, but I do have it on the shield alongside enchanted and fortifying shield rush. Infinite final step, I would recommend going for the Cunning Heart Rune of Primal Fury. This is from the new Savage and Divide dungeon, and it's just amazing. You're gonna get grits. You don't really have any debuffs because of this as well. If you were to go, for example, the more amplification damage, I believe you get rendered. So it's not really worth it, you don't really get a good trade. But this rune on the other hand, you get crit. So as soon as you do your combo, and I'm going to show a couple of clips, you're going to get a ton of damage CC chains. You can follow it up with your teammates. There's just so much value from using this rune. It's just a way better version of what Detonate used to be. And on top of that, without any downsides. So definitely a great rune to go for without any of the downsides of the other runes, such as the Rending Vines that exhaust you and the Detonate that rends you as well. And that's it for today, guys. If you like the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Drop it down in the comments if you want to see any type of build or anything I haven't covered yet. If you want to be in the community, if you want to ask questions, you want to DM me, make sure to follow me on the Discord channel or ask me on my Twitch, twitch.tv Godot. I have most of my game footage there. If you want to see me play arenas or PRs and wars, that's the place to go. But if you also want to just check me out and just see the wars, purely the wars, then check out my secondary YouTube channel. It's called Godot Wars. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.